including coast-to-coast coverage on television in the United States. Phil Liggett now describes the media entourage that tells the world about the Tour de France.
Well, you know, here in France they all talk of two Tours de France. One, of course, is for the riders, and the second one is for the journalists who try to follow the race. And there are over 500 writing journalists here. There are hundreds of press photographers, quite literally. There are 16 television stations. There is television for the first time from Japan, from Colombia, and from North America. The media is quite literally here in great force for the Tour de France. But you try and see one single situation on the road when all the road is 2 cars width. There are 90 to 100 cars full of journalists, all want to see a rider when he falls off. So you can see why there's a second race. Well, when the Tour is over, of course, and the cameras lie dormant, then the written journalists get to work, and the salle de presse is quite a place to see. There are 27 telephones, 35 telex machines. Round the back there are dark rooms with the films being developed, and these films are wired around the world. It is a complete new industry set up to back up the Tour de France. The 2,500 people you see are only 10% the cyclists.
And amongst the huge travelling roadshow that adds so much to the atmosphere of the Tour, our intrepid duo are commentators Paul Sherwin and Phil Liggett, who've been with the race from the very start. Here's their assessment of the Tour.
Well, Nick, this has been a most incredible Tour, and yesterday on the top of Alpe d'Huez we saw 2 riders come home hand in hand. But you know, this Tour hasn't finished yet. There's still quite a way to go to Paris. And Paul, you've seen 7 Tours de France from the hard side of life, and what do you think of the one up Alpe d'Huez?
Well, I've seen it on the bike, and this is the first year I've actually watched, but this has been a fantastic Tour this year. It's really been very, very hard. I think it's probably the hardest Tour in the last 15 or 20 years.
Now, Paul, when we were talking about who would win the Tour back in Paris a couple of weeks ago, we both said that Le Mans and Hinault were the obvious winners and great rivals. Do you think now that, do you think A, that they've settled their differences, and B, that Le Mans will now win the Tour?
Well, I think now they've definitely settled the differences. The rivalry was there beforehand from the Pyrenees up until the Alps, but I think with the ride that they did to the Alpe d'Huez was absolutely fantastic, and the image of them crossing the line almost together, that's an image that showed that they've become friends again, and I think Hinault and Le Mans will go to Paris in 1st and 2nd place if they don't have any accidents.
Now, at the start, Paul, I know you were very sad because the riders were signing on and everybody sort of congratulating you, looking so fit and not riding the bike anymore. But, of course, you are a British champion. And then you did feel you wanted to ride the Tour de France. Now, what happens when you saw the mountains of the Pyrenees and the Alps this year? Just tell us what you really thought.
Well, when I first saw the Alps, I thought, oh, I'm glad I'm not riding again. But today, when I saw the atmosphere here coming up the Alpe d'Huez, the spectators, between 500,000 and 600,000, maybe 1 million, I thought this is just fantastic. I wish I'd ridden again.
Well, Paul has in fact been training on Alpe d'Huez today. His bike's in the back of the car, and he goes out and does up to 3 hours a day every day. So his heart is still very much in the sport, and he knows exactly the pain that Robert Millar went through on that climb of Alpe d'Huez to come in almost 20 minutes down. No doubt about this Tour de France, Nick. It's projected 2 great athletes in Greg LeMond and Bernard Hinault. But like I say, everybody that gets to Paris by the end of this week deserves a medal. This, without doubt, one of the hardest tours on the modern record books.
And if you've been watching us from the start, you'll have gathered that this is the most testing of sporting events. 2,500 miles around France, including awesome climbs in the mountains, and up to 8 hours in the saddle on any one day. The riders are astonishingly fit with quite remarkable stamina. Let's have a look now at a typical day in the life of a rider on the Tour de France.
You know, every day in the Tour de France is another long day. Everybody gets up early. There's 23 days, there's 23 different hotels. It's the most transient sporting spectacular in the world. But there's no routine day. The riders race along in that big pack. There's always something going on. It's certainly never boring. It's the same in any job, and for the professional cyclist, a cup of coffee and a pleasant chat starts the day nicely. After a drink, well-trained hands remind the rider that this is no ordinary working day, but one that requires special attention. No time to read the mail either. This is an outline of the route ahead, and to those riders who don't know the way, now's the time to learn. Early stars have the chance to sign autographs and enjoy a slice of glory. And there's even time to read about what people think of you. Laurent Fignon grabs a last-minute snack on his way to the start line. It's a long day. And just like in a factory, when the whistle blows, it's time to go to work. But not everybody's so keen. With up to 7 hours pedalling ahead, there's no hurry. The day is young and the road is long. Even Felix Leviton, the organizer, is full of pleasantries for the workers. And for the moment, the leader's dormant and the badger rests among friends. A chance for Haydn to check his wounds of days gone by. Check your brakes, sir. No need to stop for this one. A problem with the cleats on your shoes? Nothing a screwdriver won't fix. Ah, here's a rider with a knee problem. It's not the only problem he's got. You know, these long flat stages can become tedious, and there's no better way than to tune into a little music, join the Navy, or just listen in stereo. And then, if you're lucky along the route, you might just spot Papa and Mama. Marc Gomez, the ex-champion of France, has even had permission from the pack to go ahead and greet his family. What a friendly lot the riders can be at times, even though they don't stop to say hi. One basic rule in the Tour de France is that you must pedal all the way. No one says you have to stay on the road. But never underestimate the dangers of riding in a pack of over 200 riders. Elimination is just an elbow away. The miles tick by, and as the race this day approaches half distance, then lunch is taken. Riders snatch the sacks of food and then, like squirrels, store it for the remaining miles ahead. Bernard Hinault packs the food in his mouth rather than in his pockets. He's making ready with the rest for the metamorphosis that is about to take place. With lunch break over, Laurent Fignon calls on manager Cyril Guimard. And Greg LeMond prepares for the real work, which will soon begin, by putting on a hard hat. The open road ahead is now a challenging sight, and the race picks up a tempo that only the best will match. French rivals Fignon and Hinault in the sunglasses speak to each other, but neither will give anything away. If fate strikes now, a bicycle change is the only chance you'll have of getting back to the race, because the pleasantries of the morning are now a thing of the past. The Tour is now in open flight, and the huge crowds in the towns of France pack the streets to catch a glimpse of the peddlers of charm. Every day there are the adventurers like today's Johan van der Velde and Joel Pellier. They search for a stage win or even the yellow jersey. Sometimes the pack's interested, sometimes it's not. Van der Velde reads the route ahead, and the two leaders this day form a partnership from which both can profit. Behind one team, the System U squad are left to work the hardest. After all, it's their man who has the yellow jersey. In front of a huge crowd, Van der Velde wins the stage, and another long day in the office will end, but there's plenty more to come. The field behind have been beaten this time, but with prizes for the first 80 to finish, there's plenty to race for, and the photograph will decide the winners.
Well, we know it's a tough tour, but you can see from that there's a lighter side as well. Now, I'm delighted to say we've been joined by one of the best-known faces from British cycling, the former World Pursuit champion, Tony Doyle. I'm sure he's keen to get that title back this year, am I right?
That's right, I'm training very hard at the moment. The World Championships take place in Colorado Springs at the end of August. And in 1984 and 1985, I finished runner-up, so I'm hoping in 1986 it's going to be third time lucky.
We wish you well with that, Tony. I'm delighted to see you brought your bike in. Thank you very much. What intrigues me are the gears on these bikes, because they do look very complicated compared with what I'm used to anyway.
Well, they probably look complicated because there are, in fact, so many of them. This is a bike similar to the one that the riders will be using in the Tour de France, and they'll all be equipped with 14 gears. And they need the wide ratio of gearing for the mountain stages. So for the mountain stages, the larger the sprocket will mean the lower the gearing. And so depending on the terrain, the night before the stage, the riders will discuss with the manager the terrain, and then the manager will discuss the gear ratios, and then he'll go to the mechanic and tell the mechanic which ratios are required by each rider.
Something else that interests me are the drinking bottles and the whole feeding situation in general. How does all that work?
Well, that's right. I mean, the riders eat and drink as they go along. Unfortunately, they haven't got time to stop. And they carry enough drink with them and in their pockets, in their jersey pockets in the back. The food they carry will be a lot of fruit. It's moist and it's easily digestible. So they carry apples, bananas, and then things such as rice cake and fruit cake. And along the route, there'll be feeding stations where they can pick up fresh supplies as they go along.
Are you telling me they only pick up their fresh supplies at the feeding station?
Well, that's officially where they're supposed to, but sometimes a rider will drop back to the team car, which is following the race, and he pretends he's perhaps got a problem with the bike, and the mechanic or the manager will slip him another bottle of water or some more food, and hopefully the officials don't spot it.
Well, we have to look out for that in the remaining days of the Tour de France, won't we? Let me just bring you up to date with the overall positions during this rest day as we look ahead to the end of the Tour. Le Monde leads the field, as you probably know by now, with Eno nearly 3 minutes behind, Zimmerman nearly 8 minutes down, and Robert Miller at 8th, a huge 26 minutes away from Le Monde. The others from the British Isles, Martin Earley is 51st, Stephen Roach 56th, continues under the continental sun.